Let's hop right into our monthly webinar this month, 8 retention and motivation strategies that you can use to steal talent from the big boys. Now, may sound like a really fun title, but I must confess that a client helped us out with this. A couple of years ago, Paul and I had a client come to us and said, "Hey, we want to get out of the Lancaster, PA market. Well, not get out of, but we're trying to break out of the Lancaster, Pennsylvania market and go down to Philadelphia. And all the big boys are down there. How do we compete with the big boys, right?" And so we help them do just that. And you'll hear some of those stories throughout the session this afternoon. But that's where the title of this this webinar came from is, hey, we can steal talent from the big boys. And this is one time what I would encourage you to put your mask on and be a burglar and go steal talent from other places, because frankly, the good talent you want is already employed. So let's hop right in.
Who was it that was on a webinar, Ed, that said they were doing that? They were pulling talent from bigger companies. There was someone on one of our webinars.
There was someone
Yeah,
recently that said it's working for them. Yeah.
yeah,
So it can be done. A lot of times, the smaller firms think that they can't get because, oh, someone's working for this company or that company and they're big Fortune 500s or whatever. But, the smaller and mid-sized firms have a lot to offer that the big boys can't offer. And we're going to highlight that today. So, that's kind of the theme for this session is that you can steal talent. You can compete with these Fortune 100 companies when you know how to market your retention and your motivation drivers. Okay, and we're going to look at 8 specific things that we want you to analyze in your workplace and what you're doing for your people so that you can figure out what separates you from the big boys that you can pull talent to you. Okay, so you are in the right spot. If you have some long-standing job openings and you're wondering, where's the skilled talent at? Why aren't they coming to your door? You're in the right spot. If you've been in this mode the last couple of years of having to give people just to keep them from leaving, it's not a good thing. Obviously, it's the trickle down effect. You pay your people more, which means you got to charge more for your products and services, which means you got to pass that on to the customers and so on, right? So it's not a bad short-term strategy, but long-term, continuing to give raises for the same performance is never a good idea. And finally, you're in the right place if you really want to become a competitive workplace. And that you can rival, we say, rivaling Google in attractiveness because Google tends to get a lot of press for the things they do. But the reality is that you may not have the biggest budget, the deepest pockets, but you can compete and offer some things that maybe the bigger companies can't that would be really attractive to today's talent. And so here's what we're going to discuss this afternoon. First, why assuming that you know what your employees want and value could be eating away at the bottom line. So we've got some statistics for you. I like playing with statistics just in terms of figuring out what they can tell us. And we've got a couple studies today that we'll share with you to show that making the assumption on what people want and throwing money at it could be a very dangerous tactic for you. Secondly, what we're going to deliver on is we're going to show you how to align your managers and employees behind the right motivators for performance. Okay, so that employees know what they're doing, managers know what they're managing, and all that comes together with a high-performing workforce. And finally, we're going to share with you what you can do to create a really balanced strategy of retention and motivation that will provide a high value for you without impacting your bottom line substantially. Okay. And so when we look at this, the bottom line today is how can we give people what they want so that they give us what we want, right? How do we reward them for their time, talent, and efforts in exchange for some good pay, some good benefits, great work environment, those types of things. We're going to learn how we manage and really marry those things together today. So a quick plug for next month. Next month, we're going to talk about culture transformation. And so whether your culture is firing on all cylinders, or maybe you've got some areas of it you'd like to clean up, you're going to find some gold nuggets in our 10-step culture transformation session next month. That is Wednesday, November 13th, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can hit my website up at edcrow.com/webinars, and that will get you to the sign up sheet if you have not already signed up for the entire series. Okay, so I think I'm seeing familiar faces in the crowd, some familiar names in the group, but I think a lot of you know us. But hey, just to be formal, my name is Ed Crow. I am the talent transformation expert for organizations seeking 8-figure growth. I get them that growth by putting in position the right leaders, trained in the right way to deliver on the right promises that the employees are expecting. And so my good partner in crime here is Dr. Paul Newton. Paul, say hi to the crowd.
Hey everybody. Ed and I met like 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe it was 4 years ago. Yeah, during the pandemic. And Ed had asked me to do some storytelling help with him because that's my background is ghostwriting, storytelling, and really putting together the story that tells all about your organization. And after we worked together, he was saying, "Hey, this is exactly what my clients need to tell about their workplaces so that they can attract the employees that they want." And so since then, we have been going gangbusters doing this for companies so that they can tell a story about their culture and their workplace to say why they're so unique and why you should choose us over Google.
Yeah. So let's hop in and talk about these 8 retention and motivation drivers. Now, sometimes when I talk about this topic, people will say, "Well, Ed, I don't have a problem with retention. I have a problem with attraction." And I say, "Okay, I get it. So let's swap out attraction for retention, right? And say attraction and motivation drivers." But the bottom line is this: if we get the right mix of the 8 things that we're going to talk to you about today, not only are you going to pull people to you, but the people that you're pulling to you are going to be motivated to get results, which means you're doing a better job with your bottom line. And if you're delivering on those promises, they're going to stay with you, which drives your retention. So it really is a process that will allow you to come full circle with your people, to attract the right ones, motivate them when they're in there, and get them to stay. So, first thing we want to talk about are benefits. So, when you think about benefits, and we've got, a few here on the word chart that you see in the graph here. What I'd like to know is, aside from, say, like the typical ones, right? Medical, vision, dental, 401k, maybe some paid leave kind of things. What are you doing that's unique maybe to you? What kind of benefits do you offer that maybe separate you out? Go ahead and throw those in the chat for us.
And while we're looking for those, oh, we got Becky says ESOP. Uh,
Oh, nice.
Krista says paid volunteer time.
Ooh.
They're great things. But there was one thing, and I've come across it a few times when the books or speakers are talking about Google, is that the employees there can take 20% of their time. And I'm not saying you should do 20% of their time, but they
Right.
can research, they can spend it looking like doing study and research on projects that they just think are cool.
Yep.
And these things turn into the products that now we're paying money for monthly and are generating recurring revenue for Google. And those are the perks that come up over and over again that don't outright cost you additional money. I mean, you're paying them their salary while they're doing it. But things like what Krista says here, paid volunteer time, that's similar, right? Because it's generating goodwill in the community, it's getting your name out there, and you didn't pay extra for that.
Right. Krista, that's a great one. It always makes me sad when I share this story. There was a gentleman that I served on a couple of boards with over the years, and he worked for a local privately held organization, and in order for him to serve on these boards, he had to take personal time. So if we met from like 7:30 to 9, that 8 to 9 time frame, he had to take an hour of vacation time to serve on the board with us. And I asked him one time, well, why is that? He's like, well, it's not a company sanctioned thing. Like, but we're on an HR board serving an HR organization. Like, why? And he's like, they just don't do that. And I just found that so, I mean, to me, that was sad that this organization is well known in our community, and yet they're not fostering a sense of community service. And so that paid volunteerism is a nice one. Um, and I'm sorry, Paul, what did Becky say? ESOP.
Yes,
Has
ESOP, yeah.
That's a huge benefit, right? I mean, if you are an employee-owned organization and there's a way for me to come into your organization and become an employee owner of it, how cool is that, right? So the thing with benefits is they can cost us a lot of money, certainly on the medical side, okay? But there are lots of benefits out there that really don't cost much. And so you can look at little perks. Maybe it's a fancy coffee machine in the break room, right? Instead of your regular old, black and decaf, you put a Keurig in there and with some hot ciders and teas, right? It doesn't really cost you much, but it's a nice little benefit for your people. Do you do things like celebrate birthdays, and how do you celebrate them? I mean, that's a benefit. We tend not to think of it as such, but it is a benefit. And if we're celebrating people's birthdays in a special way, well, how do we do that, right? What is our culture about when it comes to those things? So when we think about benefits, I don't want you to get stuck on the idea that these are medical benefits, okay? But the flip side is too, even if you're looking at the benefits that you shell out a lot of money for, okay, is it getting you the return on your investment? So I know the owner of a transportation company pays the full benefits for medical for his part-time bus drivers. And most people are like, how does he afford to do that? Well, he did the math and he realized that, yes, that's a big expense for him. But one, it's something he wanted to do for his people as part of their company culture to take care of the people. But he was also having tremendous turnover with his bus drivers, and he can't afford to have that. It takes too long to train someone, get them their Class B CDL if they don't already have it, and train them on the equipment and all that stuff. And he realized that, hey, he has a lot of single parents as employees. They're struggling with benefits. I'm going to write that big check because I'm saving on the back end. So my view on things that we pay for in business with our people is, can we write whatever size check it is we need to write as long as we're getting the return on the investment? That's what's key. We don't want to just write the check. We want to analyze whether we are in fact getting a return on it. And for him, the return is huge. He's getting the goodwill that he wants, but more importantly, he's attracting people to him from the other transportation companies that don't offer that as a perk. Paul, I'm
So we have
seeing
some more,
what do we
yeah,
got?
things are popping up here. We got Krista says paid volunteer time that we got educational reimbursement as well as
Okay.
gym reimbursement, which I
Oh,
like very
nice.
much. And
Okay.
Becky says annual health fair.
Okay. That's another great one, right? Sometimes those health fairs cost a couple of bucks. Sometimes they don't really cost anything. And yet, what a great offering to have your people screen for, high blood pressure and, maybe cholesterol or whatever, else is going on there, right? That they can get that and they don't have to take time away from work to go to a regular doctor's appointment. So, these are little things. And it could be something as little as, I've seen little things like, hey, here's a gift card to go down to the local bake shop on your birthday and buy yourself a birthday cake kind of thing, right? It doesn't have to be little, or excuse me, it doesn't have to be the big things. Now, on the flip side, I did see an owner one time. This was a very small company, had an employee just going above and beyond. Employee was getting ready to take his family on vacation. The owner pulled him in and handed him a check to cover the cost of the vacation and said, you've earned this. You've been killing it for us. Go enjoy this week. It's on me. Now, that's a very generous thing to do, right? Um, but that was a nice benefit that recognized that employee's contribution for that year. So what I want you to do is I really want you to open your minds about what benefits typically means and how do you market that to potential employees and how do you market that to your current employees to help them see maybe how good they do have, they really do have it at your organization. So let's shift gears from benefits. And Paul, why don't you take it away here?
So culture and work environment. Culture is a thing that that people think, oh, we have a good one. Oh, it needs some work, but you can't really put your finger on what it is or define it.
Mhm.
And Ed and I were talking this morning about, well, it really is something that you need to have defined and protected because it's got to be exactly what you want, and you have to know how to keep it the way you want it, and you have to know what to do in order to keep it that way. And then the work environment that really depends on what your work environment is and what kind of products and services you provide. So here we see like a machine shop, and clearly it's hot and dirty and noisy. Yet you can have people working in machine shops that are very happy, or you could have people that are working in basically a sweatshop under slave sort of conditions that that are really unhappy. And the way that you do that is through culture and what you offer. And so I know Ed's worked in with companies that have just this, like I guess like with machine sort of shops and floors and things like that. What kind of things did they do to make them nicer or make them more appealing?
Well, one thing, again, just looking at this picture, what do you notice in this picture? Every single workstation has a fan. So at least, it's helping to circulate some air for that individual in that workspace. Um, so again, did it cost money to install all those fans and you're paying for the electric and all that? Sure. But again, what's the value to the employee of knowing, hey, I know the work that I'm doing is in a hot and sweaty environment. I knew that when I got into this line of work, right? But what's the company doing to mitigate some of that? Next week, I'm speaking at a healthcare conference up in Maine, and they asked me to come back. I was actually up there last year, and we were talking about this concept of selling your work environment. And one of the people said, Ed, you realize that there were a lot of people in the room that were from long-term care facilities and nursing homes, and they said, you realize what like our nurses aides do? Like it's not very fun. It's not very pleasant in many cases. I said, I absolutely understand that. But don't you think that the people that are coming to you to apply for nurses aid work knew what they were getting into when they went to get their nurses aid certification? They know what the work environment's going to be like. And so we can't just sit back and say, oh, well, I'm in this line of work and it's dirty work and I can't do anything about it. Well, to a certain extent, that's true. But people that are in your industry, excuse me, they know what the work environment's like and they still chose to go into it. So it's really, what are we doing to mitigate some of the challenges of the work environment that someone's in? I've seen companies bring in, popsicles on a really hot day, right? Doesn't cost a lot of money, gives the workers a little bit of a break. Bringing in an ice cream truck, or maybe it's hot chocolate on a cold day kind of thing. Like these little things, again, if you go back to the benefits, right? Employees appreciate them. They don't cost a lot of money, but it shows that we care about our people and it gives us that nice work environment. And with this one, we are talking about the physical work environment. We'll talk about the rest of the environment in a couple of slides. But, as Paul said, and I love the word he used, like, what is our culture and how are we protecting that culture? Uh, I always use the example because people say, well, I don't even know if I have a culture,
Right.
right? And I said, well, first off, everyone has a culture, right? Like if I went over to Paul's house for a holiday, I would see how his family celebrates the holidays. Okay. And I'm sure it's different than how my family celebrates the holidays. And they might be doing something that I've never been exposed to. I say, hey, that's really cool. Where does that come from? And he would say, oh, well, in our family, this is why we do this tradition, right? And so he may not think anything of it because he's grown up in that tradition. But as an outsider, I'm going, hey, that's really cool. And so that's one of the challenges with our culture is sometimes we're so close to it that we forget how cool it really is. Paul, do you
And
want to go ahead?
that's why we were talking earlier today just about how when we're working with companies, why we come back to them and say, this is what people think is really great about working here. And more often than not, the people we report back to are blown away because they had no idea what people liked or didn't like, or the things that were taken for granted. And in a lot of cases, businesses are spending a lot of money on things that people
Mhm.
don't give a crap about. They don't care about it. And they're
Yes.
spending nothing on things that people really appreciate or enjoy. And so these things like being able to go volunteer in the community and not having to take personal time make a big difference. Or something as simple as, hey, you can schedule some time to do your own personal research on something. You just have to book it ahead of time, like, get it cleared, make sure we're not too busy, and you can work on some side projects that interest you. That wouldn't cost anything, but it can give the right person a whole lot of value. So
Yeah.
learning what these things are takes asking people. And it's one thing uh, for you to ask, like, what would you like, and how an employee will answer you. And it's a whole other thing when a third party comes in and starts talking to people and seeing what their sentiment is and how they feel about things and how much more they open up. Because again, like if you've been around it all the time, you take it for granted, they take it for granted, and they have their ways of interacting with you and with the levels of authority in the company that aren't there when somebody else comes in and has a chat with them just about how they feel and what they think. And you get a wealth of information on the good and the bad, which you absolutely need, because culture, it's a work in progress. You want to evolve it to a place where you realize that the employee experience can't all be, you know uh, roses and, like, rainbows and unicorns. Like, there is a job to do, and like these guys here are welding stuff and they're doing it in the heat. They can't get away from that, but they can enjoy the fact that they work for someone who cares about them, that they work with people that have a nice community bond, and they have little traditions that are fun, like what they might do on breaks or after work, and little perks like that they do have a really nice, cool break room where they can go and have something refreshing that they wouldn't get at another organization if they were doing exactly the same job. And this is key, right? Because people can get the same job somewhere else for the same pay, but they can't get the same experience as they're getting in your organization. And it's key to nail that experience and market that.
Yep. Exactly. All right, let's slide on here. So let's talk about the hard dollars and cents. What are you paying your people? This seems like an easy, but the challenges, especially in the economic environment we're in now, is again, if you are writing a check to someone, which you do every Friday, what are you getting in return for that investment? Okay. It's not about, oh, Paul worked 40 hours for me. So here's his 40 hours worth of pay. Okay. Paul agreed to come to work for me in exchange for a certain rate of pay, but to produce some certain results for me. Right. And so there has to be a balance. The moment I'm not getting the results out of Paul, I'm not getting a return on the 40 hours of pay that I'm giving him. So that's why, I know that sounds very basic, but when we're talking about the financial comp side of things, not only does that wage have to be fair in the marketplace for Paul, it has to be enough for him to say, yeah, I want to drive results for this pay, not just show up and start pressing buttons on a machine or typing on the computer. I want to drive results. Ed's taking care of me. He's given me a very fair wage, and it's enough to motivate me to come in and do a good job. Now, the question is, what's really going to motivate someone in terms of pay? Well, if you're not paying at the average market rate, you're already behind the eight ball, right? So you really need to know where your pay is in comparison to the market. So the market is not just your competition, but your geographic market. And when you think competition, it's not just maybe the folks that are in your industry, it's anyone with whom you're competing for talent. And so you need to be able to gather the data or have someone do it that can gather data and say, okay, here's your pay structure. Here's what's going on in the marketplace. Do we need to make any adjustments to tie up this? Because no matter, honestly, no matter what we do with culture, if your pay is too far below where the market bears, someone is not likely to come to you. Okay. Now, once we get them in and they love your culture, they may be willing to not earn as much as elsewhere. I see it all the time, but it's on the attraction side that we've got to be really competitive in the marketplace in order to get people to look at us. And then we get them hooked once they're in because of the benefit package and the culture and the work environment. And then they say, okay, maybe the financial piece isn't as important to me. Now, as you heard Paul say in his introduction, he's a master storyteller, right? So there have been times where we've been able to work with a client to say, okay, well, they're lagging a little bit in financial comp, but they got all these other good things going on. Let's start telling that story about the good things they've got going on in order to attract people into that environment. And then they say, you know what? I want that environment. And yeah, I might be willing to sacrifice a little bit of finance to get that environment. Now, don't think you're getting them for 10 grand less, right? But they might be willing to say, yeah, okay, I'll take a little less than what maybe I think I'm worth because I know from 8 to 5, I'm going to be real happy with what's going on there. And so, from a financial comp perspective, I think this is the easiest one to nail down. Get yourself a good salary study. I do them all the time, quite honestly, for clients to say, okay, are we in the right spot? And if we're not, what do we do about it? Right. And then that becomes a strategy discussion at that point. So we'll talk more about some other pieces that maybe relate to finance here in a little bit, but I'm going to turn it back over to Paul for number 4.
So growth and earning potential, that's a really key experience nowadays because the people coming into the job market, we're talking it's millennials are well established in the job market, but the Generation Z and these alphas that are starting to get working, life's all about experiences now, and like so much so that we've got to talk about the experience age where everybody wants to know what it's like to be somewhere. Before you even go to a restaurant, you want to know what it's like. What does the food look like? Uh, what are the ratings? How much did people enjoy things? We don't do anything that doesn't have a 4.5 or above star rating on it. Like, how do people rate your work? Like, how do they rate working for you? Like 4.5 out of 5 or whatever? Like, how do you know? So this growth and earning potential is how much more experience can they gain from working at your organization? What's the opportunity for them to become a better person and grow who they are? Because the lines have blurred between home and work life. People expect them to be kind of blended. And so they want to come somewhere where they feel cared for and where they feel like who they are as a person matters, uh, how they develop as a human being matters. And we really have to be a lot more caring than we used to be. And I mean, it used to be park your feelings at the door. And I remember, like that was quite normal. Like we go to seminars and they would talk about, well, you need all your staff to just like hit that button right when they get the door, and then they become this happy person that works here no matter what's going on at home. Well, we can't say stuff like that anymore, right? It's we have to support our people. So growth and earning potential is something that if you have really really cool programs that promote growth, and just even in looking through the chat here, that paid volunteer time, education reimbursements and gym reimbursements, health fairs, those sort of things, those benefits feed into this, and they can be marketed as pieces that are they can be positioned as pieces that promote the growth. And then earning potential, well, that's the opportunity that someone has to show that they're developing and get rewarded for it. And this is something that I'm going to throw it back to Ed because it's a financial piece here. But we've discussed this, and I've been writing about this in the book that we've got coming out here. Is that Ed hates to see people just getting paid more just because they show up or just because they're there. But if they have the opportunity to show that they can do something additional for additional pay, and they are motivated to do that, and they respond to that, then it's worth giving them additional pay. So I just want to throw that back to you, Ed, and see what you have to add around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with the growth piece, Paul. And looking at some of the folks in the room that I know, and some of you have smaller organizations or very flat organizations, and you say, "Oh, well, gosh, Ed, there is no career ladder. You got a picture of a ladder there. We don't have a career ladder. We're very flat." Okay, growth doesn't always mean upward mobility, right? And so, if you've got the opportunity for someone to move up the corporate ladder, as it were, great. Okay. But in a flat or a smaller organization, you can still invest in the growth of your people. They may never be a senior level manager or a vice president because they're not family, or they may never be the head of a department, but because they don't have the skill set at that level. But what kind of growth are they seeing within their skill set? That's very important to people. So don't confuse growth with climbing the ladder and moving up through the organizational chart necessarily. For some people, it's just about, okay, what am I learning? How am I growing as a person and a professional in my role? And I will hang out in your organization, even though there's maybe nowhere to climb, because I'm still learning and becoming a better me. Paul, you're smiling.
Krista's. I think we should just get Krista to pop in and share her story here, if you're
Okay.
willing to do that, Krista, or I can read it. What, but it's pretty
Krista, why don't you,
funny.
why don't you unmute and pop in? What do you got?
As an HR generalist, I mean, I started with this company about a year and a half ago, and I give my personal phone number out. I really try to stay connected with my candidates the whole way through to, when I'm hiring them. I'm seeing a lot of younger, and I have my own kids. There are five of them between 20 and 29, so I relate to that younger group. They don't know things like health insurance benefits. They don't understand deductibles and co-pays and why it's important to have health insurance. And so some of those like little things, I feel like I'm kind of mom to them. I did have an employee she's 22, lives in her first apartment, and she had roaches and bugs, and she was like, guess she thought that that was okay. And I'm like, that's not healthy. So kind of, I spent 5-10 minutes doing a little research on the computer and gave her like a whole packet of who to contact. She's a renter, like what you need to do. And she just couldn't believe that I would take the time to do that. And that meant a lot to me because she's feeling that we actually truly care.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And we're going to talk about that type of climate in a moment here, right? Like, what's the management climate like? So, in other words, it's not always about how we truly manage people, but how we interact with them. So, I'm going to hold any more thoughts on that one. So, I'm not stealing our thunder. But, Krista, thank you for sharing that, because, you know, you taught that young lady something, right? That so she has grown as a person, knowing that, hey, I'm out here, I got these adult responsibilities, but I didn't know that there were resources for me, that I don't have to live with bugs. I mean, like, you don't have to live with bugs. So this is an important thing. So again, so growth can mean a lot of different things to different people and what they need at a stage of their career or their age even, right? So don't downplay the growth piece. All right, so let's talk about that management climate. Okay, um, what is it like to work for the people that you have making decisions in your workplace? I'm sure all of us have had some really good managers in our lifetime and some really bad managers in our lifetime. And I know personally that I've learned a lot from the bad managers, for sure, right? but that doesn't mean I want to go work for them again. And so when I think about management climate, I think about how our management team, our supervisors, our department heads, team leads, how are they interacting with our people? Are they treating our people the way we want them to be treated? Have we given our management team the proper training and tools to effectively manage their people? This is huge. I mean, too often I see situations where, that team leader is a really good team leader, so we promote her to a supervisor. Maybe she does okay as a supervisor, promote her to a manager. Now all of a sudden she stinks. Well, what happened? Well, we stopped giving her resources, or maybe we grew her out of her own comfort zone without having any additional training. And now all of a sudden, we've promoted her out of her aptitude level. And so when we're thinking about our management team and the climate we want to set, we can't underestimate the importance of that frontline management team to our culture. They're the ones that need to reinforce the culture that we want. And when they stop doing that, we lose everything that we've worked for. I've seen managers that take a strong stance on safety. And what happens? You see injury rates go down. You see safety committees getting energized by working with their fellow employees to make it a safer workplace. And then I've seen managers that are just all about production. Well, they get the production numbers, but typically quality just starts to go down. Maybe the safety issues creep in, right? So if we don't have managers that are focusing on the big things, the safety, the quality, the production, all of it equally, all the while taking care of the employees, we have a faulty management climate. And so when I see the faulty management climate, the majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, it comes back to those managers, supervisors not having the tools they need to manage effectively. And when I say tools, I guess I really mean skills, right? They've not been trained properly to handle any given situation. And so what happens then is we get disgruntled and discouraged employees. And I can give an example of a healthcare practice we worked with where these people, this ties into the financial piece, right? They were being paid well over the market for their services because the owners, who were the docs, knew how bad the climate was there. And so rather than fix the climate, they were just writing big checks to their people, to the point that people then couldn't leave because they were making such really good money. But what was happening is they would tell all their friends, don't come here. Go across the street to the hospital. Go to this medical practice. Don't come here. The climate is horrible. There's your tie back into drawing talent from the big boys. They couldn't do it because of their management climate, and we had to fix that. Paul, is there something you want to add there?
They all seem to interconnect so much, right? Like
Yeah.
the management climate with the culture and what's coming up with the relationship with supervisors. So it's the link is just really tight. So I think I'm good here.
Okay. Well, let's when you think about, so what I'd ask all of you is, what is your management climate like? And you don't have to put this in the chat or anything. This is kind of personal, but what resources and training do you give your management team? And that doesn't mean it has to be in-house. Like someone mentioned in the benefits that they have educational reimbursement. Okay, well, if that person's using that to better themselves as a management person, great. What type of leadership skills are you giving your management team? What kind of performance management skills, conflict resolution? I could go on and on, but these are all people used to call them soft skills. I prefer the term non-technical skills, right? Can our management team handle these things for us in an effective way? Because again, I look at that frontline management, they're the rubber band between the employees and upper management and ownership. And so they need to be flexible as that rubber band, and we need to stretch them, but not to the breaking point. And so in order to keep that from happening, we've really got to give them the tools that they need so they can be confident in how they're handling people. Now, how does this lead to a retention and motivation driver? Well, when you've got good management teams, people will run through walls for them. And when the word gets out on the street that, hey, I've got a really good boss, you got to come work work for me because Paul, I love working for this guy. He's going to hold you accountable. He's going to make sure you're getting results, but he's a good dude. He's got my back all the time. You got to join our team. That's the kind of talk you'll start to hear on the street around some of these organizations. And so that's the benefit of really investing in your management team so that the management climate not only supports the culture, but that it in fact also becomes a recruiting tool. I saw a flash there, Paul. We got something?
Yeah. So Krista, again, she says our upper management does not interact enough. We have filled out of necessity due to growth or vacancies, leading to a lack of great mid and lower level leaders. And I just on the management climate, I wanted to also bring up because it flashed to me after that one of the people we worked with had like the organization has the open door policy, which a lot of people say they have,
Right. Yeah.
but I did 5 focus groups with this with these teams, and they all talked about the open door policy and how they could actually just call up anybody for advice, insight, mentorship, and get it. And that is the culture in that organization, and it's well known about their management climate.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, that's something that, do people really appreciate an open door policy? And to what level do we have an open door policy, right? We can say, oh yeah, my door is always open, but if I'm not approachable, what difference does it make, right? So, in that case, we heard lots of good things. Yeah, I can go to my manager, I can talk to him or her, and stuff gets done, and they listen to me. How huge is that? Hey, Paul, kicking it over to you.
The relationship with the supervisor, well, I mean, we always hear that people don't quit jobs, right? They quit their supervisors. And I here in Canada, it's Thanksgiving this weekend, so my sister's going to be coming up, and she's been working in a number of different mortgage kind of related companies, and she had a job a few years back that, I mean, she was never happy when she was there because she complained all the time. But now she regrets leaving there because there was a lot of things that were good, but the one thing that was bad was that she was irate all the time about her direct report, like the person she reported to, and she couldn't stand that guy so much that she left. And now she's been hopping from job, like not job to job, but like a couple of companies, and nothing's ever sort of measured up to the company she left. But that was the supervisor relationship, and these relationships are key. And so the things like Ed's talking about, those management skills and the conflict resolution skills, and just all these so to speak soft skills are so important, and so much more important than just getting the job done or hitting targets, which are important as well. But if you're losing people over that, then something needs to be done about it. And again, how do you measure that? And who's going to tell you in the organization if the person asking them is the supervisor that they don't have a good relationship with? They're not
Mm-hmm.
going to talk. And
Yep.
that's where you're not getting the really valuable information that could help you to improve your culture, find out those tidbits and those pieces of gold that you could market uh, to the prospects that you want to hire, to those candidates. And so that having that type of relationship is key. Now, I don't know what else to say here, Ed, about this. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to there has to be a personal connection. Yes, it's business. I'm not saying personal like you got to go out to happy hour with them or play golf with them or whatever, but there does have to be that connection, right? Because my supervisor is the one that I'm interacting with on a daily basis, sometimes constantly throughout the day based on the type of job it is. But even in a situation where maybe you've got a remote employee, um, how that supervisor acts and reacts. I remember working for a lady for a while who, just the way her office was set up, her computer screen, everything, put her back to her office door. So every time you went into her office, if it wasn't a scheduled appointment, you had to knock because you had to get her attention, right? And you're almost afraid to knock because she'd get startled and turn around. And so it was just very awkward, right? It made the whole situation awkward. But the other thing this woman would do is, she ran our office, right? And so she would park right up at the front door, almost like basically in one of the handicap spots, even though the parking was right around to the side. It was 20 yards away or whatever. There was a superiority kind of aura there, if you will, that kept all of us at a distance, and there was never really a connection there for most of us. And so most of us didn't stay there long simply because of that. And so while the management climate is one thing, and the training and the skill set that our entire management team has, that's why I've broken this one out for you, because that relationship with that individual supervisor can mean more than just about anything else. And I think, Paul's sister is a perfect example that she gets run out of a company that she otherwise enjoyed just because someone was being a goof, right? And that's a shame. And unfortunately, we have people like this. And so we have to ask ourselves, okay, they might be getting results, but are they getting them in the way that we want? Or are they getting in the way of better results? Okay, next up, time and flexibility. I love talking about this one because people love to argue about what time and flexibility really means. Okay, so I will simply say this. I don't think that flexibility means that people should come and go as they please, right? I mean, we've got assembly lines to run, we've got customers to service, right? I mean, people just can't show up and leave anytime they want. Not most people. Maybe you have some folks that can show up anytime they want. Okay. When we go back to the culture thing, and as Paul mentioned, these things all kind of connect here, right? So let's say you have a department that can be very flexible, that it really doesn't matter when these people work. Okay. But then you've got your assembly lines and manufacturing floor where they've got to work their set hours. And you've got, say, your front desk receptionist who has to work set hours. That's no reason to put out a company-wide edict that says everyone shall work from 8 to 5. Why couldn't someone work noon to 9 if it didn't matter based on the job that they were doing, or 3 a.m. to noon, or whatever, right? So we should look for these kinds of opportunities to have a flexible work environment when it can work. And the reason for that is there is study after study that shows that all of us have our peak performance times of the day. Okay. You probably have never thought about it, but I bet you know that there are certain times of the day where you just fire on all cylinders, right? You're at your best. And other times of the day, you're like, like for me, I'm not a morning person. So I protect the morning. I don't do stuff, say, first thing or even before 10 a.m., really, that requires me to do a lot of creativity because it's not my peak time. Get me between 10 and 1, that's peak creativity time for me. And so I'll protect that time when I need to get some writing done or some thinking or prepping a webinar like this, right? Later on in the day, when I'm starting to get maybe a little tired mentally, I know it's not a good time to write. So I don't schedule writing for then. But I might schedule my interactions for them because that gives me some energy, right? So I know this about me, right? And so it's how I'm able to set my day up so that I can be in my peak performance zones for as long as possible. That to me is the key to flexibility, okay? Now, we've got a mom here with a baby, right? That's the other side of flexibility. How can we be flexible based on where a person's at in their life cycle? So I was working with a company last year and doing some focus groups for them. And in the course of that, the one guy said, I'm not allowed to, I'm a single dad and I'm not allowed to get my daughter on the bus because it requires me to come in at 8:30 instead of 8, even though I'm willing to only take a half-hour lunch or stay till 5:30. And my supervisor's only explanation is, well, we don't have a policy that allows that to happen. Why do you need a policy, right? This is an otherwise good employee. By everything I could dig up, he gets results. He performs. Now he's sour because, hey, I've got to pay the babysitter to come over to the house for a half an hour every day to get the kid on the bus. Why would we do that to somebody, right? And he was in a role that did not require him, there was no immediate customer need for him to be at his desk by 8 a.m. 8:30 was going to be just fine. So those are the kind of things we really need to stay focused on from a flexibility standpoint and not put these edicts out that, well, because one person's job can't be flexible, then no one is allowed to flex. Okay. And so is anyone doing anything really cool around flexibility in the workplace? Let's throw that in the chat. I see some stuff popping there, Paul.
Yeah. So Krista says the mentality here is that if we do it for one, dot, dot, dot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she also shares that we allow employees to flex up to 4 hours per week for personal reasons rather than using personal time off. But they have to make up those hours during that pay cycle.
Yeah, I get that. And I certainly am a believer that no good deed goes unpunished. So I feel you, Krista, right? Like, I give Paul that time, and then Chris is trying to go, well, he gets to do, why can't I do it? Well, Krista, you're in a different job than he is, right? So I get we don't always want to deal with those challenges. However, I guess I'm just asking you to think open-mindedly and say, okay, if we were able to let people flex and leave early because they want to get to their kids' high school football game or whatever, right? Knowing that they're going to make the time up or they're getting their projects in on time or whatever, why wouldn't we do that? I guess that's the question. Why wouldn't we? And if the answer is, well, because not everyone can do it, I'm sorry, I just don't accept that. I personally don't advise my clients to say, oh, that's a valid reason. Paul,
Becky says that they have core hours, but start and end times are flexible for salaried employees.
Yeah, exactly. And, and then again, people say, oh, well, then our hourlies look and say, oh, well, management can come and go. Okay, well, management has a different skill set. They have a different set of responsibilities. They're probably checking emails at nights and on the weekends. So as the hourly employee, you don't have those responsibilities, right? But you're on the assembly line. Now, if you want to get some skill sets to get up to be a supervisor or a manager, let's talk about that. And then you would have those flexibilities, right? So I guess I feel like so often we just don't want to have those tough discussions. So that's why we just say, nobody can do it. I think as we continue to figure things out post-pandemic, we certainly see what the remote work thing is doing. And, companies continue to say, hey, thou shalt come back to the office. And employers are saying, why? It's been 4 years now and I'm content. I've got a new work schedule. I'm still productive. Why are you essentially going to give me a pay cut? Because now I've got to put gas in the car and drive to work every day, right? So these are, remember, no good deed goes unpunished, but failing to do things can also get you punished too. Paul, you ready for the last one?
Yeah.
All right,
bring it on.
Paul here.
Okay. Training and development. And I feel like we've touched on this in a bunch of different angles, but they're all important for different reasons. And as Ed was saying in the last motivation driver, if you get the training, maybe you can move from being in on the assembly line to whatever. Training and development gives people the opportunity first to know that how to do their job well, and takes away a lot of the anxiety about whether they're doing it right or doing a good job or not. But it also gives people an opportunity to grow, and it's just absolutely key now. And they're really, to not provide the adequate training for people now, it's hard to get around that. Like it's so easy to set up all these different sort of standard processes, and I know it takes time, but it's a lot. I think it's a lot easier now, Ed, don't you, and than in the past to get these things standardized and documented than ever before, because you don't have to just write them down by hand. You can record videos of how things are done. You can just follow somebody around that's doing it well, and get video footage and documentation of the steps and feed it all into that good old machine there, ChatGPT, and have them printed out. It's getting easier than ever. So training and development, I mean, not only is it providing like what the bare minimum of what you need to get the job done, but it gives people that security and that stability of feeling like I know what I'm doing. And if
And
they
the
are
younger
seeking to
generations are
grow,
demanding it.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
did you want to differentiate here just between the training they need for their job, their positions, and training that they need, skill sets they need to grow?
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of companies do a good job with basic job training, especially for our frontline employees. But where we drop the balls on the development side, how do we keep people growing constantly? Whether it's through, it's one thing. I think it was Becky that mentioned that they've got education reimbursement. That's great. How many people are using it? And what are they using it for? Is it benefiting the company, right? What kind of courses are they taking? But bringing some development opportunities in-house, um, some executive coaching, management coaching through leadership development types of programs. Those are all things that help us to get better. And I get so sad when I see, a company who's maybe struggling a little bit, or certainly when the economy turns, one of the first things we take away is any kind of training budget. And I never understand that, because training is what helps us drive performance. And so just when, the economy's slowing down and the company maybe isn't hitting its goals, the first thing that we do is take away the one thing that can help people be ready to meet the goals, right? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And so um, I guess what I wanted to emphasize is that, we put these things in an order. They're not, it's not ranked best or most important to least important. It's just how we listed them, right? And so training and development is at the absolute core of a successful business. And the millennials, they really started asking for this, but now the Gen Zs and the alphas, they're demanding it. They're asking in interviews, what kind of training programs do you have? How am I going to develop? What is my earning potential, right? Related to my development. So again, these things link back and forth. So let's have a little bit of fun here. So here are those 8 retention and motivation drivers. Okay. I want you to think in, what would be the top 3 that would be important to your people? And just jot them down for yourself. You don't have to put it in the chat, but jot it down for yourself. Of these 8, what are the 3 most important to your people, do you believe? So here's why I asked that question. There's a study done a few years back, and they asked thousands of managers, hey, what do you think your people think is important? And in this particular study, this was the order. Now, don't, throw eggs at me through the screen saying, I don't believe any of that. Okay, wait a minute. Remember, it's just what this study said. Okay. There is no right or wrong answer here. But here's what's interesting about this study is they asked thousands of employees who reported to these very managers what they felt was important to them. And here's what they said. Now, again, no throwing stuff at me. People like to throw stuff at me when I share this study, because they'll say, well, I don't believe that. It's not about belief. It's a study. What is important to see in this study is look at the top 4 or 5. They're not anywhere near the same. There is a monster disconnect here between what management thinks is important and what the employees say is important. That's the lesson in this study. This is the problem. So it doesn't matter what you believe is important or what your employees say is important in terms of order. It's that you're both on the same page, right? So if you asked your people, what would they tell you? Give that list to your people. Ask them, what do you think? What's important to you? It'll help you know where to put money. So in the case of this particular study, look, employees said, hey, it's benefits. Okay, then I'm going to put a lot of money behind benefits and the comp and the earning potential, because that's where they're saying it's at. The other stuff, not quite as important. Okay, your culture might be something different. It might feel a little different there. Okay, so that's the takeaway from this slide. I know we're right at the top of the hour and we are wrapping up. So I want to cut this a little shorter than I would prefer, but suffice it to say, again, I would take those 8 things and go out, ask your management team first off what they think, get their feedback, and then have them ask their people. It has to just informally, and then compare. See what you get. I'd be curious to see how much overlap you have, if any. But whatever you get out of that, you're going to glean a bunch of really cool insight into what you need to do to retain and motivate your people. So, Paul, final thoughts from you?
Well, this on this slide, you're going to see the code word is experience, and you'll get a white paper on the experience age. And what we'd like from you is just a little feedback on this webinar, so we can make the next one even better. And just scan that QR code and give us that feedback and enter the code word, and you will get that experience paper. And that experience age is really the key to everything that we're talking about, because people are no longer looking for a job, they're looking for an experience. And what is that experience that your workplace is providing? That unique experience is your unique advantage in the workplace, and what makes you different from the big boys, the company down the street, and why the exact same job description is completely different when it's done at your organization.
So it'll take you just a minute or two to scan that and answer just a couple simple questions to get that experience age right up from us. So I'm going to assume that everyone had a chance to scan that. If you didn't, holler. But I want to thank you for attending today while you are wrapping that up for us. We hope you enjoyed this look at the 8 retention and motivation drivers as we define them, in terms of using them to draw talent to you and then keep it motivated and retained. That's really the biggest bonus to focusing on those 8 things in the right mix that your company needs. So we're happy that you're able to join us today. If you'd like to chat further, you can either make mention of it in your review or hit my website up, edcrow.com, and right there on the homepage is a link. Get you free a half hour with Paul and I to chat about these things and how you can help your organization to steal talent from the big boys. So until next month, on behalf of Paul, thank you so much for attending. We look forward to seeing you again in November. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.